On February 21st, 2025, a small team at one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges on Earth sat down to do something completely routine. They were moving money between two of the company's own accounts. They'd done it many times before. They opened the transfer, checked the details on their screens, and one by one they approved it. It took a few seconds, and in those few seconds, they handed roughly $1.5 billion to a team of hackers working for the North Korean state. Here's the part that almost every headline got wrong. Nobody broke into this exchange. No firewall was smashed. No password was stolen. No vault was cracked open. The people who approved that transfer were real employees using real security keys, following the rules exactly. The problem was simpler and far more frightening. The screen in front of them was lying. This is the story of the single largest theft in recorded history, bigger than any bank robbery, any art heist, any gold vault ever emptied. And every step of it is written permanently onto a public ledger that anyone in the world can read. This is latent trace. To understand how this happened, you have to understand what Bybit is. Think of it as a bank, but for digital money. Millions of people around the world keep their savings on exchanges like this one. At the time, Bybit was the second largest crypto exchange on the planet, with more than 50 million users and billions of dollars flowing through it every day. What the attackers took was around 400,000 units of Ether, the main currency of the Ethereum network, second only to Bitcoin. On that Friday afternoon, it was worth roughly $1.5 billion, which raises an obvious question. Digital money is in cash in a drawer. You can't just walk in and grab it. So how do you steal $1.5 billion that only exists as numbers on a network? To answer that, we need to look at exactly how a company like this protects its money, because on paper, Bybit did almost everything right. Big exchanges don't keep all their money in one easy-to-reach place. Most of it sits in what's called a cold wallet. Picture a vault in the basement, deliberately kept offline, disconnected from the internet, so that no hacker sitting at a keyboard on the other side of the world can ever touch it. It is, by design, the safest place to put digital money. But a vault this important can't be opened by just one person. So exchanges use a system that works like the launch codes for a nuclear missile. No single individual can act alone. To move money out of the cold wallet, several trusted, authorized people each have to approve the transfer with their own private security key. One key isn't enough. You need the group. This is the setup that's supposed to make theft impossible. Even if a criminal steals one person's key or tricks one employee, they still can't move a cent. Everyone has to agree. So on February 21st, when the team gathered to approve a routine transfer, the system was doing precisely what it was built to do. Multiple people, multiple keys, every rule followed. And that is exactly why what happened next is so disturbing. To approve these transfers, the signers used a piece of software, an app trusted across the entire industry called Safe Wallet, once known as No-Sys Safe. It's the dashboard where they could see the transaction, check the details, and give their approval. The attackers understood something crucial. They didn't need to break the vault. They didn't need to steal the keys. They just needed to control what the signers saw on that dashboard. Imagine signing an important contract in front of a lawyer. You read it. It says exactly what you expect. You pick up the pen, but in the half second before the ink touches the page, someone swaps the paper, and the words you actually sign are completely different from the words you just read. That is, in essence, what happened here. On their screens, the signers saw a normal, boring transfer between two company accounts. Everything looked correct, so they approved it. But the instruction they actually signed was something else entirely. Hidden inside it was a single altered setting, a command known as a delegate call, that once approved, let the attacker's own program quietly rewrite the vault's rules from the inside. They weren't authorizing a payment. They were handing over control of the vault itself, one approval, and the thieves didn't just get the money in the account, they got the keys to everything. You might ask, didn't anyone check? They tried, but the security device meant to catch this only displayed the real instruction as a long, meaningless string of code, unreadable. So the humans trusted the screen. And the screen was lying to them. Security experts have a name for this weakness. They call it blind signing, approving something you can't actually read. It's the crack that this entire attack slipped through. And it's why, when investigators from two security firms, Sygnia and Mandiant, later took the attack apart piece by piece, they reached a conclusion that surprised almost everyone. Bybit's own systems were never broken into at all. The real break-in had happened somewhere else entirely, because how do you take control of a tool trusted by companies guarding billions of dollars? You don't attack the tool, you attack a person. Weeks earlier, on the 4th of February, the attackers had quietly compromised a single laptop, a computer belonging to one developer who worked on that trusted app. The weigh-in bore a very specific fingerprint. It arrived disguised as an ordinary piece of software, a harmless-looking stock market simulator, the kind of side project a curious developer might download and try out. It was, in fact, a trap, and it's a signature move of one of the most notorious hacking groups in the world. They don't break down the door, they get you to open it by dangling something that looks like an interesting project or even a job offer. We'll come back to who they are. Once that laptop was infected, the malware quietly stole the developer's access to the company's cloud systems. And here's the clever part. The company had a strong security rule. Every so often, you had to reconfirm your identity on a second device before you could get back in. But the attackers never triggered that check. They simply rode the session the developer had already opened, slipping in behind him like someone catching a door before it locks. And then they waited. For 2 full weeks, they sat inside the system, watching, learning how everything worked, careful to move only during the developer's own working hours so that nothing ever looked out of place. Then just 2 days before the theft, they planted their trap, and they set it with chilling precision. The malicious code was designed to stay completely invisible, activating only when one specific target opened the app: Bybit's vault. Anyone else in the world would see a perfectly normal tool. Only Bybit would see the lie. And the moment the theft was complete, roughly 2 minutes later, the attackers deleted their code, trying to erase every trace that it had ever existed. But here's the thing about this kind of crime. Erasing the trap is easy. Erasing the money's trail is not, because that trail was about to be written onto the most public record on Earth. When the last signer gave their approval, the trap sprang. And what happened next took barely a few minutes. In the first instant, that single approved instruction did its quiet work. It swapped out the vault's controls, tearing out the real lock and dropping the attacker's own program in its place. To anyone watching Bybit's systems, nothing looked wrong. The transfer had been approved. It was done. Then the draining began. In a rapid burst, one transaction after another, the attacker's program swept the vault clean, pushing the Ether out in batch after batch to a row of waiting wallets. Around 400,000 units of Ether, gone in less time than it takes to explain it. By the moment anyone inside Bybit understood what they were staring at, there was nothing left to stop. One of the safest vaults in the industry, one of the largest single pools of digital money anywhere on Earth. Emptied, gone. Now, in a normal heist, this is where the criminals vanish into the night and investigators are left with almost nothing. But cryptocurrency is different, and this is where the story turns. Every transaction on the Ethereum network is recorded on a public ledger called the blockchain. Think of it as a giant, permanent notebook that anyone in the world can read, that can never be erased and never be edited. The instant that money moved, the whole world could see it move. Within hours, independent investigators, who do nothing but trace stolen crypto for a living, were already following the funds in real time. One of the most respected, an anonymous analyst known only as ZachXBT, quickly reached a conclusion and backed it with hard evidence. This was the work of a state, and that created one of the strangest standoffs in the history of crime. Investigators could watch the stolen $1.5 billion live, moving from wallet to wallet. They knew where it was at every second, and they still couldn't stop it, Because watching money on a blockchain is one thing, freezing it is another entirely. What followed was a race against the clock. The attackers knew they were being watched, so they moved fast. First, they split the enormous pile of money into dozens of smaller batches, scattering it across a web of fresh wallets to make it harder to follow. Then they began pushing it through services designed to break the trail. The first and the biggest was ThorChain, a service that lets you swap one kind of cryptocurrency for another across different networks. In the days after the theft, its traffic exploded to record highs as the stolen money flooded through it. By the estimate of Bybit's own chief executive, Ben Zhou, more than 70% of the stolen funds, well over $1 billion, were pushed through that one service and converted step by step into Bitcoin, which is far harder to trace. And this is where the story took an uncomfortable turn. ThorChain isn't run by a company. It's run by a scattered community of operators who vote on the rules. When some of them realized whose money they were processing, they voted to block it. But within minutes, that decision was reversed because the fees pouring in were enormous. One of the project's own lead developers quit in disgust, publicly walking away rather than help launder money for a dictatorship. The machine, it turned out, was making too much money to stop itself. From there, the Bitcoin was fed through a whole chain of other services built to scrub away its history. Mixers, swap tools, and one exchange in particular called X, which by some estimates handled as much as $200 million of the stolen money, and which asked no questions. When investigators pleaded with it to freeze the incoming funds, it flatly refused. The two had a history, and X simply wasn't interested in helping. And it worked. Within days, most of the money was beyond anyone's reach, converted into Bitcoin and pushed toward the shadowy corners where crypto is quietly turned into ordinary cash. Investigators could still follow a great deal of it across the ledger, but following the money and recovering it are two very different things. In the end, only a small fraction was ever frozen, but X's defiance didn't last. Weeks later, it abruptly announced it was shutting down, warning of what it called an active operation closing in. It was right. In late April, police in Germany raided the service, seized its servers, and grabbed what cryptocurrency they could. But by then, it was far too late. The money was already smoke. So who does something like this, and why? The answer is what makes this story so much bigger than a single robbery. The group behind this attack is known as Lazarus, and it works for the government of North Korea. The FBI publicly named them, tracking this operation under the codename TraderTraitor. And the motive is not what you might expect. This wasn't theft for yachts and mansions. Think about the country we're talking about. One of the poorest and most isolated nations on Earth, sealed off by decades of sanctions, largely locked out of the global banking system. A country like that has almost no legal way to earn foreign money, so it built an illegal one. Over the past decade, North Korea has quietly turned cryptocurrency theft into a national industry, run by teams of state-sponsored hackers whose full-time job is to steal from the rest of the world. And they have become frighteningly good at it. In a single year, they stole more than $2 billion in crypto, a record, and investigators believe that money flows directly into the one thing the regime prizes above all else: its nuclear weapons and its missiles. If those investigators are right, every dollar drained from that vault helps pay for a warhead. This isn't a robbery, it's a funding operation for a rogue state. And if you followed this channel, this is the moment the pieces click together, because we have met this enemy before. 9 years earlier, in 2016, the same country attacked the Bangladesh bank, trying to steal nearly $1 billion straight out of the global banking system. And their method then was the same as it is now. They didn't break the underlying network. They compromised the trusted computers that spoke to it and made the system approve their fraud. But in 2016, they got lucky in reverse. A single spelling mistake in one of their fraudulent orders raised a red flag. A human noticed. Most of the money was stopped, and they escaped with only a fraction of what they wanted. This time, there was no spelling mistake. There was no suspicious clerk. There was no human standing between the criminals and the money, just a machine following a signed instruction to the letter, doing exactly what it was told. The lesson North Korea learned from Bangladesh was simple: remove the human, and 9 years later, they had. So what happened to everyone caught in the blast? Remarkably, Bybit survived. Its chief executive, Ben Zhou, went public within hours, kept customers informed almost in real time, and secured emergency funding to cover the hole. Within days, the exchange had replaced the missing money, and ordinary users, the millions of people whose savings sat on the platform, did not lose their funds. But Bybit didn't just absorb the blow and move on. It went on the offensive. The company launched something the crypto world had never really seen at this scale: a public bounty, offering anyone who could help freeze or recover the stolen money a share of whatever they clawed back, up to 1/10 of it. Overnight, it turned the hunt into an open competition. A live scoreboard appeared online, tracking the good actors racing to catch the funds against the bad actors helping them disappear. With millions of dollars paid out to the analysts who traced the money. It was a strange, very modern kind of manhunt. No borders, no warrants, just a global crowd of digital detectives chasing a fortune across a public ledger in real time. But the shock waves reshaped the entire industry. The uncomfortable truth this attack exposed was that the strongest locks in the world mean nothing if you can be tricked into opening them yourself. The new rule, repeated across the security world, became blunt. Trust no interface. Verify the instruction on the device in your hand, never just the screen in front of your face. And this time, the industry actually changed. Remember the fatal weakness at the heart of the attack. The signers were forced to approve an instruction their own device could only show them as an unreadable string of code. In the months that followed, the companies that make those security devices raced to close exactly that gap. The fix has a name, and it's almost absurdly simple: clear signing. Instead of a meaningless block of code, your device now shows you, in plain words, precisely what you are about to approve. Send this amount to this address. Right there, on the one screen you can actually trust. It sounds too obvious to be a breakthrough. But it is the single change that would have stopped this entire $1.5 billion theft cold. The thieves won this round by making sure their victims couldn't read what they were signing. The industry's answer was to make it readable. And the bigger picture is sobering. This single theft made 2025 the most profitable year for North Korean crypto theft ever recorded. Over $2 billion stolen in a single year, money now believed to be funding the regime's nuclear and missile ambitions. Which brings us back to where we started, and to the strangest part of this entire case. Everything the thieves did is still there. Every wallet, every transfer, every attempt to hide, all of it permanently etched onto a public ledger, visible to anyone forever. This was, in a sense, the most fully documented heist in history. The trace was complete, and it still wasn't enough to get the money back. Every case leaves a trace, but a trace only matters if someone can act on it in time. If you want more investigations that follow the evidence, and only the evidence, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next case.